All right, we're here today with the pastor of Grace Harbor Church, New Bedford, Morgan Proudfoot. Morgan, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Driving past two bridges to get here today.
That's right.
But obviously, we've known each other for a while now. I mean, you've been our church planter for the past couple of years. But you and I first talked on the phone back in 2010.
Yeah.
And you were tell us why you were calling me back then.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I remember right, we had I had planted a church. We had just went through a hard 5 years of planting a church just outside of Pittsburgh. Had left that church and was in a season of trying to find out what was next for us. I knew we needed to be at a healthy church, and so I had heard about Grace Harbor. Mark had actually connected me to you, and heard about Grace Harbor. And then really had a desire to be in New England. New England's kind of been our home away from home for the past almost 20 years. My wife is from the area and deep New England roots. And so we always knew we wanted to end up here to do ministry in New England for the overwhelming gospel need, but just was trying to figure out the right context to get us here. And that's how I got in touch with you.
Yeah. I remember hearing all of that on the phone. Just your heart for New England came through the phone. I can remember where I was, walking out of our house on Smith Hill and down Eston, up Orms, around Smith, and just doing a couple of loops, talking with you and thinking, oh man, I would really love to have this guy come up here with us. But it was right around that time that the Reimers had just come. So it was just bad timing.
Yeah.
But we agreed to keep in touch. And so I don't know if it was every couple of years or so, we'd be on the phone together, just checking in, seeing how things were going. And then 3 years ago, we met up for lunch or dinner.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, at the same place that we had lunch today.
That's right.
And that was on purpose because Sunday was your first service out in New Bedford, and I wanted to go back to the place that we had this conversation. So this conversation was just about you still trying to get to New England after, I don't know, 6 years, 8 years maybe of us talking. And I remember you laid out a couple of options and you said, do you know of anything? And I said, well, I think this about your options, which I think were all good options. I told you about one opportunity that you said, I don't think I'd be a good fit for that. And then I said, well, I think if you're talking about doing something with Grace Harbor and you wanted to be up here with us, I think we'd be interested in a church plant in New Bedford. And you said, tell me about New Bedford.
Yeah.
So what was it about that conversation or New Bedford and what we were saying that kind of led you to come?
Well, I think one of the foundational things for me, especially coming out of my experience of planning a church, kind of parachuted in, got burned. It was a good experience. It just wasn't a good experience, if that makes sense. But one of the things I learned from that was just the vital importance of being connected to a gospel-centered, word-driven church. And so, to be honest, anything that Grace Harbor was doing, I was into. I was interested in. And so when you posed the opportunity about New Bedford, I was wasn't really thinking about planting at the time, but was all about finding a local inner city in need of the gospel that didn't really have a strong, perhaps a strong gospel presence, and giving our life to that. And so I was really interested to hear about what Grace Harbor's dreams were for the city of New Bedford, and it was awesome.
Yeah. So we I laid out kind of my understanding of New Bedford and the need there. You went home and prayed about it. I think you called fairly quickly after that.
Yeah.
But it was just about, okay, we need to come up for a visit so that you can meet with the elders and we grilled you and that sort of thing. And
yeah. One of the things that I'm a big advocate of God speaking through my wife. God affirming things by my wife, and as much as I wasn't for church planting, my wife was 10 degrees even more not into church planting, based upon our experience. And when I went back to her and told her about the opportunity in New Bedford, her response was, "I think we need to consider this seriously." which totally kind of blew me away. And I was like, all right, Lord, you must be speaking. And so we began to pray. I think we fasted about it. And God made it very clear that we needed to come up and take a look at the city. And very quickly after we did, felt burdened, felt that gospel burden that the scriptures talk about, and knew that this is where we were coming. This is where God had for us.
That's great. I think maybe helpful for others who may get a hold of this video and think about planting or partnering with somebody to plant a church like we've done on our end, because it's not just you deciding, we need to decide too, right? So when you came and met with the elders, one of the reasons we knew we wanted to have that conversation is because, like you had said, you found out about us originally when our first phone call was because of Mark Dever.
Yeah.
So you knew about 9 Marks. I think you'd gone to a weekender or something like that.
Yep.
And so I already knew that there was a general like-mindedness, but then you were at the Village Church Denton, and knew that they were like-minded. And as we just talked more and more, I knew, okay, we're on the same page generally speaking. Not even generally speaking, we're on the same page on some of the very particulars, right? And then as elders, just giving the rest of the team a chance to really ask a lot of questions and get to know you a little bit. And I remember we were at Flatbreads that night.
We were,
right?
yeah.
And it was good to not just hammer all the theological points, but just get to know your story. And I think church planting sometimes is dangerous for guys, right? Like sometimes you meet a church planter and it's either like, this is awesome, or oh no.
No.
And I was just really encouraged by your vulnerability even that night, and just being honest about your struggles and what you learned, and then getting to talk to your pastors at the Village was just great. And then having them come up and meeting them, because that church also wanted to vet us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So John and Brad came up and spent a couple of days with us. And I remember after being with them, I just thought, I just want to partner with this other church to do this, you know? So it was I think that's a great model for people in some ways. So that was helpful. Not in some ways, I mean, there's other good models, but this was a good practice. I love that your church wanted to vet us just as much as you did, and vice versa. So let's think more about the process. So you guys moved up here.
Yep.
Bought a house through like FaceTime or something.
Yeah, that was crazy. I don't recommend doing that. Okay. We moved up here the summer of 2018. A couple things that also that I learned along the way from our last venture, and then also being on staff at the Village, was not only did we want to partner with a good gospel preaching, word-driven church, but we didn't want to do it alone, and so we wanted to find a team to come with us. And so almost immediately when I began, when we got clarity that we were coming to New Bedford, we were coming to Grace Harbor, I just began recruiting and casting a vision for planting a church in the city of New Bedford, Massachusetts, which most people didn't even know was a state, right? And so, had numerous conversations, invited a lot of Texans with us. And in God's crazy providence, a few of them said yes. We're with you. And so as the Village kind of sent us out and sent us, it was almost like trading teams, right? It was like that we got traded to Grace Harbor. They also sent with us a few families. And then the other thing that I wanted to do is, in our previous church plant, finances, particularly my salary, was always just, like in a lot of church plants, it was an issue. And so I wanted to just take that burden off my wife and my family at the very beginning. And so I started fundraising, support raising for my own salary for many years, for 5 to 7 years. And so those were the two things I primarily did before we moved here. Is I raised my own salary, and I was building a team, trying to convince people, praying for people to come with us. And then by God's grace, we showed up here August of 2018. You guys unloaded our trucks on that.
Without you being here, right? I remember calling you and saying, hey, we moved your stuff in. And you're like, hey, great, tell me about the house. How is it?
Yeah, something like that. It was a crazy adventure for sure.
Yeah.
And then we just started plugging in and assimilating into life at Grace Harbor.
And a big part of that was wanting you to develop a ministry within our body. So having you preach on Sunday nights, Sunday morning classes, community group, and just being around and getting to meet people. But then in God's providence, in New Bedford, that was a lame joke, we have this building sort of gifted to you, which for the church planting process, I think has felt a little bit like a curse and a major focus in so many ways. But now I think a great blessing as you turn to just really focus on establishing a church and doing gospel ministry. But let's just reflect on God's providence in that.
Yeah, I tell pastors all the time, make sure you're praying big prayers, like asking for free property. Interestingly enough, this is actually our second church building we were given. Our first church plant, we were given a building too. Same thing, prayed for a building and God just gave it. And so I don't know, I'm not saying that's normative, it's just descriptive. But in our, where we moved, in the West End part of New Bedford, there were 5 closed church buildings. And just on our little, what we call our neighborhood, 5 of them are closed up, for sale, abandoned, condemned. And we started praying for the smallest one, that God would give us that building one day, that we might be able to rent it. That was really the prayer, was that He would allow us to rent the building. And so every time we went by it, I would just pray this quick prayer. God, allow us to rent this building. And it was about 3 months after praying that I got a call from the former pastor saying, "Hey, I heard you and a crew from Texas showed up to town. You're talking about planting a church. I would love to meet you." And I responded, "That's so funny. I'd love to meet you. I've been praying to meet you." And we went out to breakfast together, Dylan's, just around the corner from my house, a little cafe. And I started right off the bat and said, I'm so glad to meet you. We want to rent your building from you." And he looked at me and says, "We have no desire to ever rent to you." And just really, my heart just sank for about 30 seconds. And then he goes, "We'd rather just gift you our building. Would you consider taking it?"
Yeah.
And the Lord answered very quickly after I asked him, and he said yes. And so, we took that. And but it didn't come without work.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work. About a year's worth of renovation, about $300,000 worth of renovation. Again, that we weren't prepared for, but the Lord provided. And that's just over and over. That's my testimony, is that the Lord provides.
Well, it's also kind of the testimony of Scripture that you preached on this Sunday, and that the Lord has promised to build His church. Amen. And even in Acts 11, you see the Lord doing the work. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about that pastor there in New Bedford with that small number of saints that the Lord sustained, and their generosity gifted to the building, needed a lot of work, but then the Lord's people, through a lot of mission teams, different churches, different Christians giving money. A beautiful picture of even Jesus' words in Matthew 16, where He's saying, telling Peter, "Upon this I will build my church." Yeah. And God, He's faithful to do so. Yeah, He's caring. And that building in New Bedford, you don't need, when Jesus promised to build a church, He wasn't necessarily talking about a physical building, right? And you don't need that building in order to do the gospel work that you guys are doing, but it's really helpful.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think it's a great blessing. So, what does that mean for you guys right now as a church family there?
Well, I think some of it, even in God's providence of, just even this COVID season, where a lot of planters are scrambling that have been meeting in churches, meeting in schools, and they're not allowed to do that anymore. Yeah. We're just so thankful that Grace Harbor New Bedford has a home, and it has a home to give gospel exalting ministry for the next generation, many generations. And so we're excited to be, in a strategic location in the center of the city center of New Bedford. We have, because of where God has placed us, it's a unique ministry. We're primarily in a poor working class neighborhood, and so all of the unique dynamics and challenges that come with that type of work. But at the same time, I mean, we have people driving in from, Dartmouth and Fairhaven and all around, and so Westport, and so we're thankful to be there.
Yeah. Last thing, just reflecting on the process and prayer. You prayed for the building, but tell us about your prayer 9 years ago.
Yeah, isn't that, it's interesting that the Lord never forgets our prayers. And I think a lot of times we pray prayers that we forget within days sometimes of praying them. Mm-hmm. But when we had left our church plant in Pittsburgh, and after a season of healing, just even doing some spiritual cultivation of my own soul, really getting an idea of what it is I wanted to just spend the rest of my life doing, what kind of context that was in. Really just began to journal out some pretty specific prayers, of Lord, I just want to pastor a small inner city church, primarily around a blue collar people, which is my background. It's the language I speak. I want it to be within walking distance of my house. I want actually several of the families to be within walking distance of the building. I want it to be, and just outlined this entire prayer. And crazy enough, God has answered that prayer. Yeah. This past Sunday, June 7th, 2020, is God answered a prayer that was prayed almost 10 years ago. And so really grateful and humbled for that.
Well, let's reflect on this past Sunday,
Dude,
which we could do for a while.
It was a great day, wasn't it?
Oh, it was so good. It was so good. I was, there were so many things that made it just a super encouraging time. Part of it is just because we've been in this season where we can't meet. Yeah. And
I could have preached a horrible sermon and it still would have been great.
Oh yeah, it would all
because we were just together.
What a gift that was.
Amen. Yes.
But even just to gather with God's people and as soon as we started singing, and in some ways for me just to see Keith up there. Yeah. A brother who's ministered to Grace Harbor for years, and the Baldwins have been just such a huge blessing to our church. Yeah. But to see him next to two people who have come up from Texas with you, and then that was just moving. But then to hear the voices in that room, I'm choking up now. I welled up with tears.
It was a foretaste of eternity that, man, it just makes you long for eternity. It's just we get to do this.
Well, it also makes you long to do this more. Yeah. Even now. So one of the thoughts I had as I was looking around the room, hearing people singing, seeing you up front, thinking about all the prayers and what's gone, is just, all right, where's the next one, Lord? Amen. Let's do this again. Yeah. Because there's work to do, right? Amen. Yeah. So the Lord tells us to pray for workers, for laborers, and to send into the harvest because it's ripe, right? And that may be us. That is us. He's calling us to do that work. So whether or not we're sending or going, we need to be doing it. And I just thought, I want to do this again. Yeah. It was just great. What's some of the things that your team's taken away from Sunday? Well,
it was such in some ways it's still kind of the air under our wings. We're just flying high. It was, so much work has gone into the past year and a half. Mm-hmm. Not only physical back-breaking work on the building, but just even relational work. One of the core convictions we had is we wanted to build a team, and so we've spent the past year and a half doing that. We're a small team, core group, but we're richly relationally connected, and that has come at a cost. That's not been easily won. We've had to fight for that. And so just for the whole past year and a half, for some of them, for others, it's been 2 years. For others, like myself, it's been 9-10 years coming. For it all to kind of accumulate on that day, come to a head, was just such a sweet blessing from the Lord. and filled with hope for what comes next.
Yeah.
Just being able to settle in to our own shoes, our own city, the relationships that we're making, to see them go even deeper in the community, and to be able to preach the gospel, like I said, on that corner for the next, Lord willing, 30, 40 years.
Amen.
I mean, I have plans of being, my funeral being held there.
Yeah.
So, not going anywhere.
Yeah. It was great to be on that corner afterwards too. Just gathering as a group of people outside and just having all the cars going by and just being a visible light in the city. It was also good in the building to see those who have committed to Grace Harbor New Bedford, those the many that came from Providence or the surrounding area, from Grace Harbor, to be a part of that. To see like all these people I love, but then also a good number of people from the community itself, from New Bedford, that you guys have met since being there. I was super encouraged by that. I was thinking, even if you had this number of New Bedford visitors at a normal time, where you could have really kind of pushed a huge launch or something like that, and it was, people weren't afraid to go out and that kind of thing. It would have been encouraging then to have that as many people as you did. But given that it's this unique time where people need to wear masks, and some are afraid to go out, some shouldn't go out, to have that many visiting, it's just super encouraging, man.
My heart was giddy. That's all. I mean, to see people that you don't know walk through the doors because they've heard, they've been waiting, they've been anticipating the opening. Our opening was delayed. It was originally scheduled for Easter, and then it got pushed back. And that the fact that they've been looking, just waiting, has been an encouragement to our hearts. Yeah. So thankful.
Yeah. So this is all really exciting, hopeful. I mean, and just again, the reminder from your sermon on Sunday, the Lord is building His church. He's doing this. I think you see His hand on this work from the beginning. What are you looking forward to now? What are you excited about this year?
Yeah, we're excited about. I mean, honestly, I'm excited to just slowly and quietly grow in faithfulness. Slowly and quietly, that the Lord would add to our numbers. Slowly and quietly preach the gospel faithfully. We're looking forward to continuing to become a vital part of the community. That's the thing about inheriting an empty building that was empty for decades, and now there's life in it. It's all right, there's life here for a reason, and so we have to, get into the community and excited to do that. But then also just, really praying for that more would come, more would join the core initial group of us that are part of Grace Harbor Church, New Bedford. There's this myth that pastors just parachute in and they start a service to reach unreached people. But church plants that start that way don't ever last long that way. They really do need a team. And church, if we look at the scriptures, it's even like Acts chapter 11. God sent families. God sent groups of Christians to go plant and establish churches. Yeah. And so we're just praying that the Lord would continue to add faithful believers to our core group, to establish the work for decades to come.
And that's really the best environment for the people you're seeking to reach to come into. So again, rather than that picture of a church planter just going in by themselves and then being the only thing that an unbeliever understands, it's just them, and everything kind of forms around that person or that one couple or something. Yeah. It is not as healthy as having the body of Christ, a whole family of families and individuals. For that unbeliever or new Christian to come and get kind of cared for by the whole body of Christ is so much better for them as well, and for the long-term health of the church as they kind of get wrapped up in that Christ culture. But what I'm hearing you say is that what you're looking forward to over the next year is just being a church.
Being a church.
So what happened to the cool like church planting phase? Like how long will you guys?
Well, I mean, Sunday we opened,
Right.
and so as I told our core team group at the end, it's like, congratulations, guys, you planted a church. Now we do the hard work of being a church, praying for God to establish us, and He does that through faithfulness over decades of ministry, fruitful ministry, and so faithful ministry.
Yeah.
We are dropping the planting language. We're not planting for the next 2, 3, 5 years. We're a church. We're going to be the church.
You're establishing a church as opposed to planting a church, and because you've planted.
Correct.
At this point.
Yeah.
And what's helpful about that, just in case people are listening and wondering like why are they making this distinction, is that I think a lot of times when we remain a church plant for 3 or 4 years, and because that's how we refer to ourselves, we actually end up starting to train people. We're messing with people's intuitions about the church.
That's correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we start redefining it and saying legitimacy comes with something else. So once we can be self-sustaining with finances, then we're officially
That's
a
right.
church. Well, that begins to define the church by money.
Yeah.
Or once this is really a thing that some people talk about. It's like, I felt legitimate once I became multi-site.
Yeah.
It's like, well, then we're defining the church by some sort of
what were you before?
consumeristic,
That's right.
I don't know, the franchise model in America, like we start defining the church differently. Or at least we mess with our intuitions. So it's helpful to say, and I love hearing you say, I'm excited about just being the church, establishing the church.
That's right.
Letting the word and the gospel sort of shape the culture, right?
That's right.
Of the people. And that becomes a really attractive thing in the city.
Yeah, I think when we look at the scriptures, that's clearly what we see, that the way that God plants churches is not defined by financial, self-sufficiency or anything other than that. Actually, what we see is the opposite, that a lot of the churches were in financial need. And so it took other churches to cover their needs. So money never defines us, or, all these external things. It really is, the gathering, the preach the word, the taking of the sacraments, that all of those things that define, that help rise up a healthy church membership. That's the best thing we can do, is to establish a healthy church in a city that desperately needed one, for God to work through. So.
Yeah. Okay, last couple questions here, so I'm not sure how much time we've got or how long this has gone. I could do this for a while, but maybe for people who might get a hold of this video who are thinking about church planting, or other churches who are doing the work and they stumble across this, it might be helpful. You've already mentioned that this isn't the first one you've done.
Yeah.
And you said it was a good experience, it just wasn't a good experience.
That's right.
Though a lot of people would have defined what you did as being very successful because the numbers were good.
Yeah.
And you grew really fast.
Yep.
And you ended up doing a lot of speaking because of that. People were looking to you as a model.
Yeah.
And yet you're saying that wasn't a great experience. And now you're doing it differently. So what are some of the lessons you learned, or what have you done differently this time as opposed to your first time?
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, just my understanding of what makes, just the ecclesiological understanding of what constitutes a church and not just an event, where we're trying to get everybody hyped about doing good works and about Jesus, as opposed to truly following him and loving one another. Those are two fundamental differences. But then also too, just even the commitment to, you got to be connected. If you're considering church planning, if you're considering coming to New England, praise God, you're an answer to prayer.
Yeah.
But you got to be connected to a healthy, word-driven, gospel-centered church that has an understanding of what faithfulness looks like over a long period of time. Oh. And so that's the first thing I would encourage. The second thing I would encourage is you can't do it by yourself. And so pray and ask God to send people with you. And it's one of those bold prayers, right? That we don't we like to say we believe, but I'm here to evidence and say, I mean, God will answer that prayer. He will send people with you. Or you'll pray for people and you'll join other people who have already been thinking about this type of work. So those are two things. And then just the third thing, and I'm always thinking about this, I'm kind of wired entrepreneurially and thinking about, times and how they're changing and how the churches are financed and just being open to creative ways that the Lord would use to take care of your family. All pastors have a responsibility to financially support their family. Yeah. And so whether that's a bivocational thing, whether that's, you doing eBay on the side late at nights, whatever it is to take, you got to get creative and make it work. But man, God's ability to provide for you and to take care of you, like He promises to do it. And so you'll find He's faithful. Yeah,
some of the things that stuck out to me as you're talking, but also when we were first meeting up and talking about planting, is just you had a very worked out set of categories that needed to be there for you to even come. Yeah. You had pillars of truth. Yeah. They were or pillars of health. You called it.
Pillars of health.
You wanted, and so you were really looking to the church that you were partnering with to make sure some of those things were there and in place for you, because it's not just part of and this was exciting for me. It's not just the process of planting that makes that important. It's the ongoing relationship. Yeah. So because you've come and you've been a part of our church, and it's Grace Harbor that's planted the church. Yep. It's not just Morgan out there and his team doing it, but we as elders have been involved along the way, been out there quite a bit with you, and we've just been a part of all the things that have been happening. The relationship doesn't end now. Yeah. You guys are your church and you're planting, but we're a part of the same network of churches. We're part of our own informal network of churches. Yeah.
We're friends.
We're friends. So, Lord willing, we're going to be doing this.
That's right.
For years down the road, and continue to communicate and pray and serve one another in various ways. I hope I get the chance, soon at some point to preach in your pulpit and to have you back and preach at Grace Harbor. So, that's another. I think huge thing to this whole process.
I think one thing that we don't want to just it really was you guys planting us. It was Grace Harbor Church Providence that actually remodeled our building. All of the work days, all of the sending of Bob Bullock, all of the.
I was about to say it was Bob Bullock. But anyway,
that's true. But it was Grace Harbor members that. This whole summer, you guys worked your tails off by renovating a church building, which you had no plans of doing.
No intentions of doing that. Yeah.
The first church plant you've ever done that way, right?
Right. Yeah, they've all been different.
Third church plant. Now this one, you guys renovated a building. So just super encouraging. The support. Grace Harbor Church Providence really is our family. Yeah. We love. We have deep relationships there, and are so excited to be continuing in those relationships, even though now we are our own church, but you guys are still family.
Which is wonderful for the people that we've sent. We did our best to hang on to the Baldwins for years, and you're welcome, because there was lots of times where they were almost out of here, right? But we held on to them.
Thank you.
We married the Izzies, which sounds weird because we always call it Izzy, but now it's the Izzies. Yep. Anyway.
They're awesome. We love them.
But what's great about having this relationship and being a family and it being nearby is that even as we see people go, they're going to just our other family.
That's right.
And so the relationships don't end. Yeah. So if you're still praying, I know many of you are still considering and praying about being a part of Grace Harbor New Bedford. Yeah. This isn't like a goodbye like it used to be when you sent someone on missions and you just never saw them again, or you're only going to see them in a while. It's
just like family. It's like a family reunion. Yeah, right? We're all come from the same mommy and daddy.
So I think that's something I know you're praying for, and I know people in the church are still praying about. Yeah. And so we would invite you to do that. Just still think about whether or not God would have you come and be a part of this gospel work, because it's part of what we've always prayed we would be at Grace Harbor as a sending church, or a church that would plant churches, and that involves sending people.
Yeah.
And this is a good work to be a part of, and that's why the elders have led us to do this. And so we hope many of you will keep praying and go and be a part of this exciting work.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Praise the Lord, brother. I'm so thankful.
Well, thanks,
The
man.
Lord has worked the way He has to bring you here, and thinking about the phone call back in 2010 till now, I'm just grateful, and
yeah, we're so excited and thankful for you guys. So
yeah, praise the Lord.
amen.
Praise